Hello, everyone. This evening we'll be discussing what weddings entailed during medieval times. Let's not delay and begin our journey into the past. In the misty dawn of medieval Europe, when church bells echoed across cobblestone streets and candlelight flickered in narrow windows, weddings were elaborate tapestries woven from tradition, politics, and faith. These ceremonies bore little resemblance to the romantic celebrations we know today, for they were intricate dances of social necessity, family honor, and divine blessing that could determine the fate of entire bloodlines. The very concept of marriage in medieval times was fundamentally different from our modern understanding. Love, while not entirely absent, was often considered a secondary consideration to more pressing matters of inheritance, political alliance, and social advancement. Young women, sometimes as early as 12 years old, found themselves promised to men they had never met, their futures decided by fathers who saw matrimony as the ultimate business transaction. The bride's virginity was her most valuable asset, more precious than gold or land, for it guaranteed the legitimacy of future heirs and maintained family honor in a world where reputation could mean the difference between prosperity and ruin. Preparations for a medieval wedding began months, sometimes years, in advance. The bride's family would spend considerable time and resources preparing her trousseau, a collection of clothing, linens, and household goods that would accompany her to her new home. This trousseau was not merely practical, but served as a display of the family's wealth and social standing. Rich fabrics, intricate embroidery, and valuable accessories were carefully selected and crafted by skilled artisans. The bride herself might spend countless hours learning the domestic skills expected of a medieval wife, from managing household servants to preserving foods for the long winter months ahead. The groom's preparations were equally elaborate but focused on different aspects of the union. He would need to demonstrate his ability to provide for his future wife, often by securing property, establishing trade relationships, or proving his military prowess. In noble families, extensive negotiations would take place between the two families, with detailed contracts outlining dowries, inheritance rights, and the division of property. These agreements were legal documents of immense importance, often involving lawyers, witnesses, and church officials to ensure their validity. The selection of the wedding date itself was a complex process governed by religious calendar, seasonal considerations, and superstitious beliefs. The church prohibited marriages during certain holy periods, including Lent, Advent, and various feast days throughout the year. Spring and early summer were preferred seasons, not only for practical reasons of weather and food availability, but because they symbolized new life and fertility. However, many couples had to work around harvest schedules, as the agricultural cycle dominated medieval life and required the participation of entire communities. Medieval wedding invitations were quite different from the elegant cards we might expect today. News of upcoming nuptials spread through word of mouth, with family members, friends, and community leaders personally visiting potential guests to extend invitations. The size of the wedding was often a direct reflection of the family's social status and wealth. Noble weddings might attract hundreds of guests from across the region, while peasant celebrations were typically smaller, more intimate affairs involving only the immediate community. The bride's attire was perhaps the most visible symbol of her family's status and the importance of the occasion. Contrary to popular modern belief, white wedding gowns were not the standard in medieval times. Instead, brides typically wore their finest dress, often in rich colors like deep blue, burgundy, or gold. The fabric might be silk, velvet, or fine wool, depending on the family's means. Wealthy brides adorned themselves with precious jewelry, including elaborate headdresses, ornate belts, and rings set with precious stones. The dress itself might be embellished with intricate embroidery, pearls, or metallic thread that caught the light as the bride moved. Hair was considered a woman's crowning glory, and unmarried women traditionally wore their hair loose and flowing as a symbol of their virginity. The wedding day was often the last time a woman would display her hair so openly, as married women were expected to cover their hair with veils or headdresses. This transition from loose hair to covered head was deeply symbolic, representing the bride's passage from maidenhood to wifehood. The groom's wedding attire was equally important, though perhaps less elaborate than his bride's. He would wear his finest tunic, often made of expensive fabric and richly decorated. A new sword might be commissioned for the occasion, serving both as a symbol of his ability to protect his new family and as a display of his wealth and status. Noble grooms often wore family colors or heraldic symbols that proclaimed their lineage and social position to all who witnessed the ceremony. Medieval wedding ceremonies themselves were fascinating combinations of pagan tradition, Christian ritual, and legal procedure. The actual wedding might take place in several stages, beginning with the betrothal ceremony, which could occur months or even years before the actual marriage. During this ceremony, vows were exchanged, rings were blessed and given, and the couple was considered legally bound, though they would not live together until after the final wedding ceremony. The church ceremony was the heart of the medieval wedding, though it might surprise modern couples to know that the actual exchange of vows often took place not inside the church, but on its steps, in full view of the community. This public location ensured that the marriage was witnessed by many people, making it legally binding and preventing future disputes about the validity of the union. The priest would bless the couple and pray over them, but the actual words of commitment were spoken by the bride and groom themselves, often in the local language rather than Latin, so that all witnesses could understand. Inside the church, a special mass would be celebrated, during which the couple would receive communion and additional blessings. The ceremony might include the reading of marriage bans, public announcements of the intended union that had been proclaimed on 3 previous Sundays to give anyone with objections the opportunity to speak. This practice helped prevent bigamous marriages and ensured that both parties were free to marry. One of the most charming aspects of medieval wedding ceremonies was the exchange of symbolic gifts and gestures. The groom would present his bride with a ring, but he would also place it on different fingers while reciting in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, finally placing it on the fourth finger of her left hand, where it was believed a vein ran directly to the heart. Coins might be exchanged as symbols of the groom's ability to provide financial security, and sometimes the bride would present her new husband with a specially embroidered handkerchief or other token of her domestic skills. The wedding feast that followed the ceremony was perhaps the most elaborate part of the entire celebration. For wealthy families, these feasts could last for days, with multiple courses, entertainment, and accommodations for guests who might have traveled great distances to attend. The feast was not merely a celebration, but a display of hospitality, wealth, and social connections that could influence the families standing in the community for years to come. Medieval wedding feasts were extraordinary affairs that showcased the culinary skills of the era and the wealth of the hosting families. The preparation for such a feast might begin weeks in advance, with servants and cooks working tirelessly to prepare the elaborate dishes that would grace the tables. Wealthy families would spare no expense, serving exotic spices, imported wines, and elaborate presentations that were as much about spectacle as sustenance. The menu for a noble wedding feast might include multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Roasted meats were the centerpiece of medieval celebrations, with whole pigs, oxen, or deer slowly cooked over open fires. These massive roasts were often presented in dramatic fashion, carried into the hall by teams of servants while musicians played and guests cheered. Fowls of all kinds graced medieval tables, from common chickens and geese to exotic swans and peacocks, sometimes prepared and presented with their feathers restored to create stunning visual displays. Fish dishes were equally important, particularly in wealthy households where fresh fish could be transported in barrels of water or preserved in salt for special occasions. Pike, salmon, and eel were considered delicacies, often prepared with elaborate sauces made from herbs, wine, and imported spices. During religious fasting periods, fish became even more central to the celebration, with creative cooks developing increasingly sophisticated preparations to satisfy noble palates while adhering to church dietary restrictions. The bread served at medieval wedding feasts was far superior to the coarse, dark loaves that formed the daily diet of most people. White bread, made from carefully sifted flour, was a luxury item that demonstrated the host family's wealth and status. Elaborate shaped breads might be created specifically for the wedding, with decorative crusts and sweet filling that served as both food and entertainment for the guests. Medieval cooks took great pride in their ability to create visually stunning presentations. Subtleties, elaborate decorative dishes designed more for display than consumption, were common at noble weddings. These might include pastry castles, sugar sculptures, or elaborate arrangements of fruits and flowers that served as conversation pieces and demonstrations of the kitchen's skill. Some subtleties told stories or depicted scenes from popular romances, adding an element of theater to the dining experience. Beverages at medieval wedding feasts were as varied and elaborate as the food. Wine was the preferred drink of the nobility, often imported from distant regions and aged in the host family's cellars for special occasions. Ale and beer were more common among the general population, but even these humble beverages might be specially brewed for the wedding celebration. Mead, made from fermented honey, was considered particularly appropriate for weddings because of its associations with fertility and sweetness, giving rise to the term honeymoon for the period following the wedding when the couple would consume mead together. Spiced wines and punches were popular medieval drinks that combined wine with exotic spices like cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. These beverages were often served warm and were believed to have medicinal properties that would ensure the health and fertility of the newlyweds. The preparation of these drinks was considered an art form, with experienced servants carefully blending spices and wines to create the perfect flavor combinations. Entertainment at medieval wedding feasts was as elaborate as the food and drink. Musicians were essential participants in any significant celebration, with minstrels and troubadours traveling from castle to castle to perform at important events. These musicians brought with them repertoires of songs, including romantic ballads that celebrated love and marriage, epic tales of heroic deeds, and humorous songs that might gently tease the newlyweds or tell amusing stories about marriage and domestic life. Dancing was a central part of medieval wedding celebrations, with elaborate choreographed dances that allowed guests to participate in the festivities while displaying their social grace and breeding. Noble families took great pride in their dancing skills, and wedding celebrations provided opportunities to demonstrate these accomplishments to a wider audience. The dances themselves often told stories or symbolized various aspects of courtly life, with complex steps and patterns that required considerable skill and practice to execute properly. Jesters and entertainers added another dimension to medieval wedding celebrations, providing comedy and spectacle that kept guests engaged throughout the long festivities. These professional entertainers might perform juggling acts, acrobatic displays, or comedic skits that celebrated the wedding while providing gentle commentary on marriage and domestic life. Their performances were carefully calculated to entertain without offending, requiring considerable skill in reading their aristocratic audiences and adjusting their acts accordingly. The tradition of wedding gifts in medieval times was quite different from modern practices. Guests typically brought practical items that would help the couple establish their new household, but these gifts were often far more elaborate and valuable than simple household items. Wealthy guests might present the couple with precious metals, fine fabrics, exotic spices, or even livestock that would provide ongoing economic benefits. Land grants were among the most precious gifts, providing the couple with income-producing property that could support them throughout their married life. The exchange of gifts between the families was equally important, with elaborate negotiations often taking place regarding dowries and bride prices. The bride's family would provide a dowry, typically consisting of money, property, household goods, and sometimes business interests that would become part of the couple's shared wealth. The groom's family might reciprocate with gifts of jewelry, clothing, or property that would remain the bride's personal possessions, providing her with some measure of economic security within the marriage. Religious elements permeated every aspect of medieval wedding celebrations, reflecting the central role of the church in medieval society. Prayers were offered at multiple points throughout the celebration, asking for divine blessing on the union and the couple's future together. Special masses might be said for the couple's fertility, prosperity, and spiritual welfare, with priests offering guidance on the religious obligations of married life. The concept of marriage as a sacrament was fundamental to medieval Christian understanding, elevating the union beyond a simple legal contract to a sacred bond blessed by God. This religious significance influenced every aspect of the wedding celebration, from the timing of the ceremony to the specific prayers and rituals performed. The couple was expected to approach their marriage as a holy undertaking, with obligations not only to each other, but to God and the church community. Medieval wedding celebrations often included charitable elements that reflected Christian teachings about generosity and social responsibility. Wealthy families would distribute food to the poor, provide dowries for less fortunate young women, or make donations to local monasteries and churches. These charitable acts were believed to bring divine blessing on the marriage, while demonstrating the family's piety and social consciousness. The length of medieval wedding celebrations varied dramatically depending on the social status and wealth of the families involved. Noble weddings might continue for a week or more, with different activities and entertainments scheduled for each day. Tournaments might be organized in honor of the couple, with knights competing in jousting matches and other martial displays that celebrated the military prowess associated with noble masculinity. Hunting expeditions, musical performances, and elaborate feasts would fill the days, creating a festival atmosphere that celebrated not just the couple, but the entire social network surrounding them. For common people, wedding celebrations were necessarily more modest, but no less meaningful. Village weddings might involve the entire community, with neighbors contributing food, labor, and entertainment to create memorable celebrations within their means. These community weddings often featured traditional folk music, simple but hearty meals, and dancing that continued late into the night. The emphasis was on shared joy and community solidarity rather than ostentatious display, but the emotional significance was no less profound. The wedding night held particular significance in medieval culture, marking the couple's transition from betrothed individuals to a married unit. The consummation of the marriage was not considered a private matter but a community concern, as it legally confirmed the validity of the union and began the process of creating legitimate heirs. In noble families, witnesses might actually be present to confirm that the marriage had been properly consummated, ensuring that future inheritance claims would be legally sound. The bedroom where the couple would spend their wedding night was often specially prepared for the occasion, with fresh linens, flowers, and religious symbols that would bless the union and encourage fertility. Special foods believed to enhance fertility might be provided, and priests would offer prayers for the couple's future children. The transition from wedding celebration to married life was thus marked by both practical and spiritual preparations that acknowledged the significance of this change in status. Medieval wedding traditions included many customs that seemed strange or superstitious to modern sensibilities, but held deep meaning for medieval people. The throwing of rice or other grains symbolized wishes for fertility and abundance, while the bride's bouquet often included specific herbs and flowers chosen for their supposed magical properties. Rosemary was popular for its association with remembrance and fidelity, while other herbs were believed to promote love, fertility, or protection from evil influences. The breaking of objects during medieval wedding ceremonies served symbolic purposes that reflected contemporary beliefs about luck and divine intervention. Breaking a piece of pottery or glass was thought to bring good fortune to the couple, while also symbolically representing the breaking of the bride's hymen and her transition from virginity to married sexuality. These customs, while they might seem crude or inappropriate by modern standards, were considered essential elements of the wedding ritual that ensured the couple's future happiness and success. Wedding rings in medieval times carried deep symbolic significance beyond their role as simple jewelry. The circular shape represented eternity and the endless nature of true love, while the precious metal demonstrated the value the groom placed on his bride. The placement of the ring on the fourth finger of the left hand was based on the medieval belief that a vein in that finger ran directly to the heart, creating a physical connection between the symbol of marriage and the seat of love and emotion. Some medieval wedding rings were elaborately decorated with religious symbols, precious stones, or inscriptions that conveyed specific messages about the couple's commitment and faith. Gimel rings, which consisted of 2 or 3 interlocking bands, could be separated during the betrothal period and reunited during the wedding ceremony, symbolizing the couple's reunion and permanent bond. These rings were often family heirlooms passed down through generations, carrying with them the accumulated blessings and good fortune of previous successful marriages. The role of parents and extended family in medieval weddings was far more significant than in modern celebrations. Marriage was understood to be an alliance between families rather than simply a union between 2 individuals, and family members played crucial roles in every aspect of the planning and execution of the wedding celebration. Mothers might spend years preparing their daughters for marriage, teaching them the domestic skills, social graces, and religious devotion expected of medieval wives. Fathers bore the primary responsibility for negotiating the terms of their children's marriages, including dowries, inheritance rights, and the specific obligations each family would undertake. These negotiations could be extraordinarily complex, involving lawyers, witnesses, and detailed written contracts that specified everything from the bride's clothing allowance to the couple's living arrangements. The success of these negotiations could determine not only the couple's future happiness, but the economic and social standing of both families for generations to come. Extended family members, including grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, often traveled great distances to attend medieval weddings, making these celebrations important family reunions that strengthened kinship bonds and renewed family alliances. These gatherings provided opportunities for arranging future marriages, conducting business, and maintaining the complex web of relationships that defined medieval social structure. The wedding celebration thus served multiple purposes beyond simply celebrating the couple's union. Medieval wedding customs varied significantly across different regions and social classes, reflecting the diverse cultures and traditions that existed within medieval Europe. Northern European weddings might emphasize different traditions than those celebrated in Mediterranean regions, while Germanic customs differed from those of Celtic or Romance cultures. These regional variations added richness and diversity to medieval wedding traditions, while maintaining common underlying themes of family alliance, religious blessing, and community celebration. Seasonal variations in medieval wedding customs reflected the agricultural cycle that dominated medieval life. Spring weddings might emphasize themes of renewal and fertility, with decorations featuring fresh flowers and green branches that symbolized new growth and potential. Summer weddings could take advantage of abundant food supplies and favorable weather for elaborate outdoor celebrations. Autumn weddings might incorporate harvest themes, celebrating abundance and the successful completion of the agricultural cycle. Winter weddings were less common, but held their own special significance, often emphasizing themes of warmth, comfort, and the importance of family bonds during the harsh winter months. These celebrations might feature elaborate displays of preserved foods, warm beverages, and indoor entertainments that brought light and joy to the darkest time of year. The scarcity of fresh foods during winter made elaborate winter weddings particularly impressive demonstrations of wealth and planning. The economic aspects of medieval weddings extended far beyond the immediate costs of the celebration itself. Weddings were major economic events that could affect entire communities, providing income for craftsmen, food producers, entertainers, and service providers. The preparation for a major wedding might require months of work from dozens of people, creating temporary employment and stimulating local economic activity. Wealthy families often used weddings as opportunities to display their prosperity and social connections, spending enormous sums on festivities that would be remembered and discussed for years afterward. These displays of wealth served important social and political purposes, reinforcing the family's status and influence while creating obligations and expectations that could be leveraged in future business and political dealings. For merchant families, weddings provided opportunities to showcase their success and establish new business relationships. The guest list for a merchant wedding might read like a directory of the local business community, with the celebration serving as an informal trade fair where deals could be negotiated and partnerships formed. The bride and groom's families would use the occasion to introduce their children to the broader business community and begin establishing the relationships that would support their future prosperity. The legal aspects of medieval marriage were complex and varied significantly depending on local customs, church law, and royal decree. Marriage contracts were detailed legal documents that specified the rights and obligations of both parties, including inheritance rights, property ownership, and the circumstances under which the marriage could be dissolved. These contracts required witnesses, legal validation, and often church approval to ensure their enforceability. The concept of consent was crucial in medieval marriage law, though it was understood quite differently than modern notions of consent. Both parties needed to agree to the marriage, but this consent might be given by parents or guardians rather than the individuals themselves, particularly in the case of minor children. The church insisted that marriage could not be forced upon unwilling participants, but social and economic pressures often made refusal virtually impossible for young people, especially women. Medieval divorce was extremely rare and difficult to obtain, making the wedding ceremony a truly permanent commitment for most couples. Annulment was possible under certain circumstances, such as consanguinity, impotence, or coercion, but required extensive legal proceedings and church approval. The difficulty of ending medieval marriages made the wedding ceremony even more significant, as couples understood that they were making lifetime commitments that could not easily be undone. The clothing and fashion associated with medieval weddings reflected not only personal taste but social status, family wealth, and cultural values. Wedding garments were often the most expensive and elaborate clothing individuals would ever own, representing major investments that families might save for years to afford. These garments served as displays of prosperity and social standing, while also carrying symbolic meaning related to purity, fertility, and social transformation. Medieval tailors and seamstresses often specialized in wedding garments, developing particular expertise in the complex construction techniques required for elaborate gowns and formal wear. The creation of a wedding dress might take months, with fittings, adjustments, and decorative work requiring the skills of multiple artisans. Embroiderers, jewelers, and other specialists might contribute to the creation of a single garment, making the wedding dress a collaborative work of art. The preservation and reuse of wedding garments was common in medieval times, with expensive dresses being altered and updated for multiple family members, or converted into other formal wear for special occasions. Some wedding dresses became family heirlooms, passed down through generations, and modified to reflect changing fashions, while maintaining their significance as symbols of family tradition and continuity. Food preservation and preparation for medieval weddings required extensive planning and specialized knowledge, particularly for celebrations that might last several days and serve hundreds of guests. Cooks needed to coordinate the preparation of multiple dishes, while ensuring that nothing spoiled before it could be served. Salt, smoking, and other preservation techniques were crucial for preparing foods in advance, while fresh items required careful timing to ensure peak quality during the celebration. The seasonal availability of foods influenced medieval wedding menus significantly, with couples often timing their weddings to coincide with the availability of particular delicacies or abundant harvests. Spring weddings might feature early vegetables and young animals, while autumn celebrations could showcase the full bounty of the harvest season. Winter weddings relied more heavily on preserved foods, but might feature special treats that had been carefully stored for the occasion. Medieval wedding cakes were quite different from modern confections, often consisting of small cakes or sweetened breads rather than elaborate layer cakes. These treats might be flavored with honey, fruits, or imported spices, making them special delicacies that guests would remember long after the celebration ended. The sharing of wedding cake symbolized the couple's commitment to sharing their resources and caring for each other throughout their married life. The transportation and accommodation of wedding guests required careful planning and significant resources, particularly for families scattered across wide geographic areas. Guests might travel for days to attend important weddings, requiring food, shelter, and security for their journeys. Host families often provided accommodation for important guests, while others might stay in local inns or religious houses that offered hospitality to travelers. The logistics of medieval weddings included considerations that modern couples rarely face, such as providing stabling for horses, arranging for armed escorts through dangerous territories, and coordinating the arrival of guests who might be traveling from distant locations without reliable means of communication. These practical challenges required extensive planning and considerable expense, making large medieval weddings complex organizational undertakings. Security considerations were important aspects of medieval wedding planning, particularly for wealthy or politically prominent families. Large gatherings of valuable guests with precious possessions required protection from bandits and other threats. Host families might hire additional guards or request military protection from local lords to ensure the safety of their celebrations. The display of wealth and the known presence of valuable gifts made medieval weddings attractive targets for criminal activity. The role of servants and household staff in medieval weddings was crucial to the success of these elaborate celebrations. Large noble households might employ dozens of people in various capacities, from kitchen staff and servers to musicians and entertainers. The coordination of these diverse workers required skilled management and clear hierarchies of authority to ensure that all aspects of the celebration proceeded smoothly. Training and preparing household staff for major weddings was a significant undertaking that might begin weeks or months in advance. Servants needed to learn special protocols for serving distinguished guests, understand the complex social hierarchies that determined seating arrangements and service precedents, and master the elaborate food service rituals associated with formal medieval dining. The reputation of the host family depended heavily on the skill and professionalism of their household staff. The temporary hiring of additional workers for medieval weddings created economic opportunities for local people and demonstrated the host family's influence and resources. Skilled craftsmen, entertainers, and service providers might compete for the privilege of working at prestigious weddings, knowing that successful performance could lead to future employment opportunities and enhanced reputations within their trades. The religious symbolism embedded in medieval wedding traditions reflected the deep integration of Christian faith into every aspect of medieval life. From the timing of ceremonies to the specific prayers and rituals performed, religious considerations shaped every element of the wedding celebration. The Church's teaching that marriage was a sacrament elevated the wedding ceremony beyond a simple social contract to a sacred ritual that connected the earthly union to divine purpose. The preparation of couples for marriage included religious instruction that emphasized their spiritual obligations as married Christians. Priests would counsel couples about the religious significance of their union, their duties to each other and to God, and the importance of raising their future children in the Christian faith. This religious preparation was considered as important as the practical and social aspects of marriage preparation. The integration of pagan traditions into Christian wedding ceremonies created fascinating syntheses that reflected the complex cultural heritage of medieval Europe. Ancient fertility rituals, seasonal celebrations, and folk customs were often adapted and reinterpreted within Christian frameworks, creating rich tapestries of meaning that connected couples to both their ancestral traditions and their Christian faith. Medieval wedding music encompassed a wide range of styles and traditions, from sacred hymns and religious motets to secular love songs and dance tunes. Musicians needed extensive repertoires that could provide appropriate entertainment for different parts of the celebration, from the solemn ceremony itself to the raucous festivities that might continue late into the night. The quality and sophistication of musical entertainment served as indicators of the host family's cultural refinement and social status. The training and education of medieval musicians was a specialized process that often began in childhood and required years of dedicated study. Musicians needed to master not only their instruments, but also extensive repertoires of songs, the ability to improvise and adapt their performances to different audiences and occasions, and the social skills necessary to navigate the complex hierarchies of medieval society. Successful court musicians often achieved considerable status and influence within noble households. The instruments used in medieval wedding music included a fascinating variety of string, wind, and percussion instruments that created rich and complex soundscapes. Lutes, harps, and various types of fiddles provided melodic lines, while flutes, recorders, and early forms of brass instruments added harmonic complexity and rhythmic support. Drums and other percussion instruments helped drive the dance rhythms that were essential to medieval celebrations. The evolution of medieval wedding traditions over the centuries reflected broader changes in medieval society, including shifts in religious practice, economic structures, and cultural values. Early medieval weddings were often simpler affairs that emphasized practical concerns and community participation, while later medieval celebrations became increasingly elaborate and formalized as wealth increased and social hierarchies became more complex. The influence of courtly love traditions on medieval weddings introduced new romantic elements that gradually transformed these primarily practical arrangements into celebrations that acknowledged emotional bonds between couples. The rise of romantic literature and music created new expectations about marriage and love that slowly influenced wedding customs and traditions, though practical considerations remained paramount for most couples. The interaction between different cultural traditions within medieval Europe created rich variations in wedding customs that reflected the continent's diverse heritage. Germanic, Celtic, Romance, and Slavic traditions each contributed unique elements to medieval wedding celebrations, creating regional variations that maintained their distinctiveness while sharing common underlying themes and purposes. The gradual standardization of wedding practices under church influence created more uniform traditions across medieval Europe, while still allowing for local variations and cultural preferences. The Church's efforts to regulate marriage created common frameworks within which regional and cultural differences could be expressed, leading to the development of recognizable medieval wedding traditions that transcended local boundaries. The documentation and recording of medieval wedding celebrations in chronicles, literature, and legal records provide fascinating glimpses into these important social events, while also revealing the values and priorities of medieval society. These records show how weddings served multiple functions beyond simple celebration, acting as political events, economic transactions, and social rituals that reinforced community bonds and cultural traditions. The preparation of wedding documents, including marriage contracts, guest lists, and ceremonial programs, required the services of educated clerks and legal professionals who could ensure that all necessary formalities were properly observed. These documents served not only immediate practical purposes, but also created permanent records that could be referenced in future legal proceedings or inheritance disputes. The preservation of medieval wedding traditions through oral tradition, written records, and cultural practices allowed these customs to influence later developments in wedding celebration while adapting to changing social conditions. Many elements of modern wedding ceremonies can be traced back to medieval origins, demonstrating the enduring power of these ancient traditions to capture fundamental human experiences and values. The aftermath of medieval weddings involved complex social and economic adjustments that extended far beyond the celebration itself. The newly married couple faced the challenge of establishing their household, navigating their changed social relationships, and beginning the process of building a life together within the constraints and expectations of medieval society. For many couples, particularly those from noble families, the wedding marked the beginning of new political alliances and economic partnerships that would influence their families for generations. The establishment of a new household required careful planning and significant resources, particularly for couples who would be living independently rather than within existing family structures. The bride would need to demonstrate her ability to manage domestic affairs, supervise servants, and maintain the complex social relationships that defined medieval household life. Her trousseau provided the foundation for her new domestic responsibilities, but success required skills and knowledge that went far beyond material possessions. Medieval wives bore enormous responsibilities for the economic success of their households, managing not only domestic affairs, but often participating directly in business activities, agricultural management, and financial planning. The skills required for successful medieval wifehood were extensive and complex, encompassing everything from food preservation and textile production to accounting and personnel management. The wedding celebration marked the beginning of these responsibilities, but the real test of a marriage's success would come in the months and years that followed. The integration of the bride into her new family and community was a gradual process that might take years to complete fully. Medieval society was built around complex networks of kinship, alliance, and obligation, and marriage created new connections that needed to be carefully cultivated and maintained. The bride's success in establishing herself within these networks would determine not only her personal happiness, but her family's continued prosperity and influence. Medieval marriage contracts often included specific provisions for the bride's maintenance and security, recognizing that her welfare depended on her husband's continued support and protection. These legal safeguards reflected medieval understanding of women's vulnerable position within marriage, while also acknowledging their importance to family prosperity and social stability. The negotiation of these provisions was a crucial aspect of medieval marriage arrangements that influenced the couple's future relationship and security. The expectation of fertility and childbearing placed enormous pressure on medieval brides, whose primary purpose within marriage was often understood to be the production of legitimate heirs. The failure to conceive children, particularly male heirs, could result in social disgrace, economic hardship, and even the dissolution of the marriage through annulment proceedings. This pressure influenced every aspect of medieval married life, from dietary choices and medical treatments to religious practices and social relationships. Medieval understanding of pregnancy and childbirth was limited by contemporary medical knowledge, but couples employed various traditional remedies and practices believed to promote fertility and ensure healthy pregnancies. Special foods, herbal treatments, religious rituals, and lifestyle modifications were all considered important factors in successful reproduction. The bride's mother and other female relatives played crucial roles in providing guidance and support during this critical aspect of medieval married life. The birth of children, particularly male heirs, marked important milestones in medieval marriages that were celebrated with elaborate ceremonies and festivities. Christening celebrations could rival weddings in their complexity and expense, serving as opportunities to reinforce family alliances, display prosperity, and secure the child's future through godparent relationships and social connections. The successful production of healthy children enhanced the couple's status within their community, while securing their economic and social future. The education and upbringing of children represented major responsibilities for medieval parents, who needed to prepare their offspring for successful adult lives within the complex hierarchies of medieval society. Boys required training in military skills, business practices, or scholarly pursuits depending on their family's status and expectations, while girls needed preparation for marriage and household management. The success of these educational efforts would determine the family's continued prosperity and influence across generations. Medieval marriage involved ongoing negotiations and adjustments as couples adapted to changing circumstances throughout their lives together. Economic conditions, political developments, family obligations, and personal relationships all influence the dynamics of medieval marriages, requiring flexibility and diplomatic skill from both spouses. The most successful medieval marriages were those that maintained mutual respect and cooperation, while adapting to the changing demands of medieval life. The role of extended family in medieval marriages remained important throughout the couple's life together, with parents, siblings, and other relatives continuing to influence major decisions and provide support during difficult times. Medieval society's emphasis on kinship and family loyalty meant that marriage created not just personal bonds, but ongoing obligations and relationships that shaped every aspect of the couple's life. Managing these complex family relationships required considerable skill and diplomacy from both spouses. Medieval widowhood presented particular challenges and opportunities that influenced marriage relationships throughout the couple's life together. The death of a spouse could dramatically alter an individual's social and economic status, particularly for women who might face significant restrictions on their independence and property rights. Understanding these potential futures influenced how medieval couples approached their marriages and planned for their long-term security. The remarriage of widowed individuals was common in medieval society and involved many of the same considerations as first marriages, though with additional complications related to existing children, property rights, and social expectations. Wealthy widows in particular might find themselves courted by men seeking to acquire their property and social connections, making second marriages complex negotiations that required careful legal and family consultation. The development of medieval marriage law reflected changing social conditions and religious teachings that gradually transformed the institution of marriage throughout the medieval period. Early medieval marriage customs were heavily influenced by Germanic and other tribal traditions that emphasized practical alliances and family honor, while later developments incorporated increasingly sophisticated Christian theology and Roman legal principles. The Church's growing influence over marriage during the medieval period created new standards and expectations that gradually transformed wedding celebrations and marriage relationships. The designation of marriage as a sacrament elevated the spiritual significance of wedding ceremonies, while creating new obligations and restrictions that influenced how couples approached their unions. These religious developments interacted with secular legal traditions, to create the complex framework of medieval marriage law. Medieval canon law regarding marriage addressed numerous practical issues that affected wedding celebrations and marriage relationships, including questions of consanguinity, impediments to marriage, divorce and annulment procedures, and the rights and obligations of married individuals. These legal developments created more standardized approaches to marriage across medieval Europe, while still allowing for regional variations and cultural differences. The interaction between civil and religious authorities regarding marriage law created complex jurisdictional issues that influenced how medieval couples approached their weddings and marriages. Different legal systems might have conflicting requirements or standards, requiring careful navigation and often expensive legal consultation to ensure that marriages were properly constituted and recognized by all relevant authorities. Medieval marriage settlements and inheritance arrangements were crucial aspects of wedding negotiations that influenced not only the immediate celebration, but the couple's entire future together. These arrangements needed to balance the interests of multiple families while providing security for the couple and their potential children. The complexity of these negotiations often required professional legal assistance and extensive documentation to prevent future disputes. The economic aspects of medieval marriage extended far beyond the immediate costs of the wedding celebration to encompass ongoing financial obligations and opportunities that would shape the couple's entire life together. Successful medieval marriages required careful financial planning and management, with both spouses contributing to the family's economic success through their respective skills and resources. Medieval women's property rights varied significantly depending on local law, family status, and marital agreements, but generally provided some protection for wives while recognizing their subordinate legal status. Understanding these rights was crucial for families negotiating marriage arrangements, as the bride's economic security depended heavily on the specific terms of her marriage contract and the applicable legal framework. The management of medieval households required sophisticated organizational and financial skills from both spouses, particularly in wealthy families with extensive properties, business interests, and social obligations. Medieval marriage was thus not only a personal relationship, but a business partnership that required cooperation, trust, and shared commitment to family prosperity and social advancement. Medieval agricultural cycles influenced marriage relationships throughout the year, with seasonal demands for labor and attention affecting how couples organize their time and resources. Spring planting, summer cultivation, autumn harvest, and winter preparation each brought specific challenges and opportunities that required coordination and cooperation between married couples and their extended households. The role of medieval guilds and trade associations in supporting married couples reflected the importance of economic cooperation and mutual assistance within medieval communities. Guild membership often provided not only business opportunities, but also social support, legal protection, and assistance during difficult times. Marriage often brought couples into these important economic and social networks. Medieval urban life presented different challenges and opportunities for married couples than rural existence, with city dwellers enjoying greater economic opportunities, but also facing higher costs, increased competition, and more complex social relationships. Urban medieval marriages often involved different priorities and strategies than rural unions, reflecting the distinct demands and possibilities of city life. The influence of medieval literature and culture on marriage expectations created new ideals and standards that gradually influenced how couples approached their relationships. The rise of courtly romance literature introduced concepts of romantic love and emotional fulfillment that slowly began to influence marriage customs, though practical considerations remained paramount for most couples throughout the medieval period. Medieval pilgrimage traditions offered married couples opportunities for spiritual growth and adventure that could strengthen their relationships while fulfilling religious obligations. Joint pilgrimages were popular among wealthy couples who could afford the time and expense involved, providing shared experiences that reinforced their spiritual bonds while offering opportunities for travel and cultural exchange. The celebration of wedding anniversaries and other marital milestones was less formalized in medieval times than in modern practice, but significant anniversaries were often marked with special observances, religious ceremonies, or family gatherings that reinforced the couple's continued commitment and celebrated their successful partnership. These celebrations provided opportunities to renew vows, strengthen family bonds, and demonstrate continued prosperity and happiness. Medieval medical understanding of marriage and sexuality influenced how couples approached their physical relationship and family planning efforts. Contemporary medical texts provided guidance on topics ranging from fertility enhancement to contraception, though much of this advice was based on limited scientific knowledge and traditional beliefs rather than empirical observation and research. The role of medieval midwives and female healers in supporting married women reflected the importance of specialized knowledge and community support for successful marriages and families. These women provided not only medical care during pregnancy and childbirth, but also guidance on domestic management, child rearing, and the maintenance of family health and happiness. Medieval marriage customs varied significantly among different social classes, with peasant marriages emphasizing practical cooperation and mutual support, while noble unions focused more on political alliance and social advancement. These class differences influenced every aspect of marriage, from the wedding celebration itself to the ongoing dynamics of the relationship and the expectations placed on both spouses. The seasonal rhythms of medieval life influenced married couples' daily routines and long-term planning, with winter months providing opportunities for indoor crafts and social activities, while summer brought intensive agricultural work and increased social interaction. Successful medieval marriages required adaptation to these seasonal cycles and coordination of activities that maximized family productivity and social advancement. Medieval marriage involved ongoing relationships with neighbors and community members that required diplomatic skill and social awareness from both spouses. The success of medieval families often depended on their ability to maintain positive relationships within their local communities, while advancing their own interests and protecting their reputations from gossip and social criticism. The influence of medieval warfare on marriage relationships was significant, particularly for noble families, whose men might be called away for military service or whose properties might be threatened by conflict. Medieval wives often bore enormous responsibilities for family and property management during their husbands' absences, requiring skills and authority that went far beyond traditional domestic roles. Medieval marriage laws regarding adultery and marital misconduct reflected contemporary moral standards and social expectations, while providing legal remedies for couples experiencing serious relationship difficulties. These laws recognize the importance of marital fidelity, while acknowledging the practical difficulties of maintaining perfect moral standards within the constraints of medieval life. The development of medieval marriage customs over time reflected broader changes in European society, including urbanization, increased trade and prosperity, the growth of church influence, and evolving legal systems. These changes gradually transformed medieval marriage from primarily practical arrangements toward more emotionally and spiritually significant relationships, though practical considerations remained important throughout the period. Medieval marriage records and documentation provide valuable insights into the realities of married life, while also revealing the values and priorities of medieval society. Marriage contracts, legal disputes, literary references, and personal correspondence all contribute to our understanding of how medieval couples approached their relationships and navigated the challenges of married life within their social and cultural context. The legacy of medieval marriage traditions continued to influence European marriage customs for centuries after the medieval period ended, with many elements of modern wedding ceremonies and marriage law tracing their origins to medieval precedents. The fundamental understanding of marriage as both a personal relationship and a social institution established during the medieval period continues to influence contemporary approaches to marriage and family life. The complexity and richness of medieval marriage customs reflect the sophisticated social and cultural systems that characterized medieval European civilization. These traditions represented successful adaptation to the challenges and opportunities of medieval life, while expressing fundamental human values and aspirations that transcend historical periods and cultural boundaries. The careful balance between practical necessity and spiritual significance that characterized medieval marriage continues to offer insights relevant to contemporary understanding of marriage and family relationships. Through elaborate ceremony, complex negotiation, and ongoing commitment, medieval couples embarked on marriages that were simultaneously personal relationships, economic partnerships, political alliances, and spiritual unions. The wedding celebrations that marked the beginning of these multifaceted relationships were thus not merely parties or social events, but crucial rituals that established the foundations for successful medieval life and the continuation of family lineages that would shape European history for generations to come. The intricate web of medieval marriage extended into every aspect of daily life, creating patterns of behavior and expectation that governed not only the relationship between husband and wife, but their interactions with the broader community. Medieval couples understood that their marriage was a public institution that required constant attention and care, not merely a private relationship between two individuals. This public nature of marriage meant that wedding celebrations were just the beginning of a lifelong performance of marital roles that would be observed, judged, and remembered by their community. The seasonal celebrations that punctuated medieval life provided regular opportunities for married couples to reaffirm their social bonds and demonstrate their continued prosperity and happiness. Christmas festivities, Easter celebrations, harvest festivals, and Saints' Day observances all offered occasions for couples to participate in community activities while displaying their successful partnership. These celebrations reinforced the integration of marriage into the broader fabric of medieval social and religious life. Medieval marriage involved constant negotiation between competing demands and loyalties, as couples balanced their obligations to each other against responsibilities to parents, children, extended family, feudal lords, church authorities, and community members. The most successful medieval marriages were those that managed these competing demands diplomatically, while maintaining the mutual respect and cooperation necessary for domestic harmony and family prosperity. The physical environment of medieval homes reflected the realities of married life and family relationships, with living spaces designed to accommodate extended families, servants, guests, and business activities. Medieval couples often shared their homes with parents, unmarried siblings, children, and various dependents, requiring considerable skill in managing complex household dynamics and maintaining privacy within crowded living conditions. Medieval cooking and food preparation represented major responsibilities for married women that required extensive knowledge, organizational skill, and creativity. The preservation of foods through salting, smoking, drying, and other techniques was essential for family survival through long winter months, while the preparation of elaborate meals for special occasions demonstrated the family's prosperity and the wife's domestic competence. The textile production that occupied much of medieval women's time was both practical necessity and artistic expression, with married women responsible for producing clothing, linens, tapestries, and other fabric goods for their families. The quality and sophistication of these textiles served as indicators of family status, while providing essential goods that could not be easily purchased or replaced. Medieval gardens and agricultural activities required cooperation between married couples in planning, planting, tending, and harvesting the crops that provided food and income for their families. The success of these agricultural efforts depended on the coordination of labor, the application of traditional knowledge, and the ability to adapt to changing weather conditions and market demands. The care and treatment of illness within medieval families represented major challenges for married couples who needed to provide nursing care, arrange for medical treatment, and manage the economic consequences of serious illness or disability. Medieval medical knowledge was limited, but families employed various traditional remedies, religious practices, and professional medical services to address health problems. Medieval marriage involved ongoing financial management that required careful planning, budgeting, and investment decisions to ensure family security and prosperity. Couples needed to balance immediate needs against long-term goals while managing the risks associated with agricultural production, business ventures, and economic uncertainty that characterized medieval life. The education and apprenticeship of children represented major investments for medieval families that required careful planning and significant resources. Parents needed to arrange appropriate training for their sons and daughters while maintaining the family connections and social relationships necessary to secure advantageous opportunities for their children's future careers and marriages. Medieval marriage customs included various anniversary traditions and renewal ceremonies that reinforced the couple's commitment while celebrating their continued partnership. These observances might involve religious services, family gatherings, or special gifts that commemorated important milestones in the couple's life together, while strengthening their bonds and reaffirming their vows. The resolution of marital disputes and conflicts required diplomatic skill and community support, as medieval couples sought to maintain their reputations while addressing serious disagreements or problems. Family members, religious authorities, and community leaders often served as mediators and advisors, helping couples resolve their differences without resorting to more drastic measures like separation or annulment. Medieval travel and pilgrimage offered married couples opportunities for spiritual growth, cultural exchange, and adventure that could strengthen their relationship while fulfilling religious obligations and social expectations. These journeys required careful planning, significant resources, and considerable courage, but provided experiences that enriched the couple's life together and enhanced their social standing. The military obligations that affected many medieval marriages required wives to manage household and family responsibilities during their husbands' absences, while maintaining the social and economic activities necessary for family prosperity. These periods of separation tested the strength of marital relationships, while demonstrating women's capabilities and resilience in managing complex responsibilities. Medieval market activities and trade relationships involved both spouses in the economic activities that supported their family's prosperity, with wives often participating directly in buying and selling goods, while managing the household aspects of business ventures. The success of these economic activities depended on cooperation, trust, and shared commitment to family advancement. The religious observances that structured medieval life provided regular opportunities for married couples to participate in community worship while demonstrating their piety and social respectability. Church attendance, religious festivals, and spiritual practices reinforced the sacred nature of marriage while connecting couples to the broader religious community. Medieval legal proceedings and court appearances sometimes required married couples to present united fronts while defending their interests and reputations against various challenges and accusations. The ability to navigate these legal complexities often determined the family's continued prosperity and social standing within their community. The seasonal rhythms of medieval crafts and artisan work influenced the daily routines and economic activities of married couples involved in various trades and professions. Winter months might be devoted to indoor crafts and planning activities, while summer brought intensive production periods and market activities that required coordination and cooperation between spouses. Medieval marriage involved ongoing relationships with extended family members that required diplomatic skill and careful attention to complex kinship obligations and expectations. The maintenance of these relationships was crucial for family security and advancement, but also created potential sources of conflict and tension that couples needed to manage carefully. The documentation and record-keeping associated with medieval family life required literacy skills and attention to detail that were often shared responsibilities between married couples. Property records, business accounts, family genealogies, and legal documents all needed careful maintenance to protect the family's interests and secure their future prosperity. Medieval marriage customs included various blessing and protection rituals that were believed to ensure the couple's continued happiness and prosperity while warding off evil influences and misfortune. These practices combined Christian religious observances with older traditional beliefs, creating complex ritual systems that provided comfort and security for medieval couples. The artistic and cultural activities that enriched medieval life provided opportunities for married couples to demonstrate their refinement and cultural sophistication while participating in the intellectual and creative life of their communities. Music, literature, visual arts, and other cultural pursuits enhanced the quality of medieval life while serving as indicators of family status and education. Medieval marriage involved constant attention to social etiquette and proper behavior that reflected the couple's breeding, education, and social standing within their community. The ability to navigate complex social situations and maintain appropriate relationships was crucial for family advancement and the achievement of personal and professional goals. The charitable and philanthropic activities that were expected of prosperous medieval families provided opportunities for married couples to demonstrate their religious devotion and social responsibility, while building networks of obligation and reciprocity within their communities. These activities enhanced family reputation while fulfilling religious and moral obligations. Medieval marriage required ongoing adaptation to changing circumstances and opportunities as couples aged and their situations evolved over time. The strategies and priorities that worked for young newlyweds might need modification as couples faced the challenges of raising children, managing increased responsibilities, and planning for their own eventual retirement and death. The preservation and transmission of family traditions, stories, and cultural heritage represented important responsibilities for medieval married couples who served as links between past and future generations. The success of these cultural transmission activities ensured family continuity while maintaining connections to ancestral traditions and values. Medieval marriage customs evolved gradually over time in response to changing social conditions, religious teachings, and cultural influences, creating rich traditions that balance stability with flexibility and adaptation. These evolutionary processes reflected the dynamic nature of medieval society, while maintaining core values and practices that provided continuity and meaning across generations. The complexity and sophistication of medieval marriage customs reflected the advanced social and cultural development of medieval European civilization, demonstrating the ability of medieval people to create institutions that balanced practical necessity with spiritual significance and personal fulfillment. These achievements continue to influence contemporary understanding of marriage and family relationships, while providing historical perspective on the evolution of human social institutions. Medieval wedding celebrations thus represented far more than simple parties or social events, serving as crucial rituals that established the foundations for complex marital relationships that would influence not only the couples themselves, but their families, communities, and descendants for generations to come. The careful attention to detail, elaborate symbolism, and community participation that characterized these celebrations reflected their fundamental importance within medieval society and culture. The enduring influence of medieval marriage traditions on subsequent European cultural development demonstrates the success of these customs in addressing fundamental human needs for security, companionship, social connection, and spiritual fulfillment within the constraints and opportunities of medieval life. The balance between individual desires and social obligations that characterized medieval marriage continues to offer insights relevant to contemporary discussions of marriage and family relationships. Through careful ceremony, ongoing negotiation, and sustained commitment, medieval couples created marriages that successfully integrated personal relationships with social institutions, economic partnerships with spiritual unions, and individual fulfillment with community obligations. The wedding celebrations that inaugurated these complex relationships were thus not merely historical curiosities, but successful solutions to the fundamental challenges of human social organization that continue to influence contemporary understanding of marriage, family, and community life. The rich tapestry of medieval wedding customs reveals a sophisticated understanding of human nature and social organization that enabled medieval couples to create lasting partnerships capable of adapting to the challenges and opportunities of their complex and dynamic world. These achievements represent enduring contributions to human civilization that continue to enrich our understanding of marriage, family, and the social institutions that shape human experience across cultures and throughout history. The intricate diplomacy required in medieval marriage extended beyond the immediate family circle to encompass relationships with feudal overlords, church hierarchies, and political networks that could determine a family's fate across generations. Medieval couples needed to understand not only their personal obligations to each other, but also their roles within the complex web of allegiances and dependencies that characterized feudal society. A marriage alliance could elevate a family's status dramatically, or, if poorly managed, could lead to political disaster and economic ruin. The seasonal cycles that governed medieval agricultural life created rhythms of intimacy and separation that profoundly influenced marital relationships. Spring brought the intensive labor of planting that required both spouses to work long hours in coordinated effort, while harvest seasons demanded total family mobilization that could strengthen bonds through shared accomplishment or strain relationships through exhaustion and pressure. Winters enforced domestic closeness, provided opportunities for emotional intimacy, but also potential for conflict within confined living spaces. Medieval marriage contracts often included extraordinarily detailed provisions that anticipated potential sources of conflict and established procedures for resolving disputes without destroying the family's social and economic position. These agreements might specify everything from the wife's allowance for clothing and personal expenses to the husband's obligations to provide adequate housing and protection. The negotiation of these contracts required legal expertise and family wisdom that reflected generations of experience with the practical challenges of married life. The role of godparents in medieval society created additional layers of obligation and support that influenced marriage relationships throughout the couple's life together. These spiritual relationships often involved ongoing financial and social commitments that required careful management and diplomatic skill. The selection of godparents for children represented important strategic decisions that could provide crucial support during difficult times or create burdensome obligations that strained family resources. Medieval marriage involved constant awareness of mortality and the need to prepare for sudden death or disability that could dramatically alter family circumstances. Couples needed to maintain current wills, understand inheritance laws, and ensure that their children would be properly cared for if tragedy struck. This awareness of life's fragility influenced how couples approached their daily relationships while encouraging them to make the most of their time together. The preservation of family honor represented a constant concern for medieval married couples whose reputations could be destroyed by scandals, financial failures, or social missteps. Women bore particular responsibility for maintaining moral standards that reflected on their entire family's reputation, while men needed to demonstrate courage, competence, and reliability in their professional and social dealings. The management of family reputation required constant vigilance and careful attention to social expectations and community standards. Medieval marriage customs included elaborate systems of gift-giving and reciprocity that reinforced social bonds while demonstrating prosperity and generosity. Wedding anniversaries, religious holidays, and other significant occasions provided opportunities for couples to exchange meaningful gifts that express their continued commitment while strengthening relationships with extended family and community members. These gift exchanges were carefully calculated social investments that required considerable planning and resources. The education of medieval women for marriage involved not only domestic skills, but also training in diplomacy, accounting, and management that prepared them for the complex responsibilities they would assume as wives and mothers. Aristocratic women might receive instruction in languages, music, and literature that enhanced their social effectiveness, while women from merchant families learned business skills that would contribute to family prosperity. This education represented significant family investments that influenced marriage negotiations and expectations. Medieval marriage involved ongoing relationships with various service providers and craftspeople who supported family life and economic activities. The selection and management of these relationships required judgment and skill that could significantly influence family prosperity and social standing. Successful couples cultivated long-term relationships with reliable suppliers and service providers while avoiding commitments that might prove costly or problematic. The religious calendar that structured medieval life created numerous opportunities for married couples to participate in community celebrations while demonstrating their piety and social integration. Feast days, saints' commemorations, and seasonal observances provided regular occasions for social interaction and community bonding that reinforced the couple's place within their social network, while offering respite from daily labors and concerns. Medieval marriage required careful attention to the complex inheritance laws that determined how property would be distributed among heirs and what provisions would be made for surviving spouses. These legal complexities often required professional consultation and detailed documentation to ensure that family interests were properly protected. The management of inheritance issues could significantly influence family relationships and required ongoing attention throughout the marriage. The healthcare responsibilities that fell primarily to medieval wives required extensive knowledge of herbal remedies, traditional treatments, and nursing techniques that could mean the difference between life and death for family members. Women needed to maintain supplies of medicinal plants, understand the preparation and application of various treatments, and coordinate with professional medical practitioners when serious illnesses occurred. These responsibilities represented both practical necessities and demonstrations of wifely devotion and competence. Medieval marriage customs evolved in response to changing economic conditions, with periods of prosperity allowing for more elaborate celebrations and expanded social activities, while economic difficulties required adaptation and resourcefulness that tested marital relationships. Couples needed to adjust their expectations and lifestyle to match their financial circumstances while maintaining their social standing and family reputation within their community. The artistic and cultural patronage that was expected of prosperous medieval families provided opportunities for married couples to demonstrate their refinement and social consciousness, while supporting the artists, musicians, and writers who enriched medieval cultural life. These patronage relationships required discernment and substantial financial commitments that could enhance family prestige or create burdensome obligations that strained family resources. Medieval marriage involved ongoing negotiations with various authorities and institutions that regulated different aspects of family life, from church officials who oversaw religious observances to civil authorities who administered legal and tax obligations. The ability to navigate these institutional relationships successfully was crucial for family security and advancement, requiring diplomatic skills and political awareness that couples needed to develop and maintain throughout their marriage. The seasonal variations in medieval social life created different rhythms of public and private activity that influenced how couples organized their time and relationships. Summer's active social season brought numerous opportunities for public interaction and display, while winter's quieter pace allowed for more intimate family activities and private pursuits. Successful couples learned to adapt their social and domestic activities to these seasonal cycles, while maintaining their relationships and family responsibilities. Medieval marriage customs included various traditional practices and beliefs that were thought to enhance fertility, ensure family prosperity, or protect against misfortune and evil influences. These practices often combined Christian religious observances with much older folk traditions, creating complex ritual systems that provided psychological comfort and social cohesion, even when their practical effectiveness was questionable. The management of medieval households required coordination between spouses in supervising various workers and dependents who contributed to family economic activities and domestic operations. The hearing, training, and supervision of servants, apprentices, and other workers required judgment and leadership skills that couples needed to develop and exercise cooperatively to ensure efficient household management and family prosperity. Medieval marriage involved ongoing attention to the complex social hierarchies and precedent systems that determined appropriate behavior and interaction patterns within different social contexts. Couples needed to understand their own position within these hierarchies, while demonstrating proper respect and deference to their superiors and appropriate authority and kindness to their subordinates. These social skills were essential for maintaining family reputation and advancing family interests. The preservation and management of family property and assets required ongoing attention and care that involved both spouses in decision-making and implementation activities. Land management, building maintenance, livestock care, and other property-related responsibilities required coordination and cooperation that could strengthen marital relationships through shared achievement or create tension through disagreement and conflict. Medieval marriage customs recognized the importance of maintaining connections with birth families while establishing new loyalty patterns that prioritize the nuclear family unit. This balance between old and new loyalties required careful negotiation and ongoing attention that could be complicated by geographic distance, political conflicts, or competing obligations that pulled couples in different directions. The educational responsibilities that medieval parents assumed for their children required long-term planning and significant resource allocation that couples needed to coordinate and support throughout their marriage. The selection of tutors, arrangement of apprenticeships, negotiation of marriage alliances, and provision of inheritance portions all required careful planning and execution that demonstrated parental love and wisdom, while securing the family's future prosperity and social advancement. Medieval marriage involved ongoing relationships with legal and financial professionals who provided essential services for family security and advancement. The selection and management of relationships with lawyers, accountants, and other professional service providers required judgment and discernment that could significantly influence family welfare and success. These professional relationships often extended over many years and required careful cultivation and maintenance. The charitable and religious obligations that were expected of medieval families provided opportunities for couples to demonstrate their moral character and social consciousness, while contributing to community welfare and spiritual development. The allocation of resources for charitable purposes required careful planning and coordination between spouses who needed to balance their desire to do good with their responsibility to provide for their own family's needs and security. Medieval marriage customs adapted to accommodate the diverse cultural and regional traditions that characterized different areas of medieval Europe, creating rich variations in ceremony, celebration, and ongoing marital practice. These regional differences reflected local history, cultural influences, and environmental conditions, while maintaining common underlying themes and purposes that transcended local boundaries and created shared medieval European marriage traditions. The ongoing evolution of medieval marriage customs throughout the medieval period reflected changing social conditions, religious developments, and cultural influences that gradually transformed these institutions while maintaining their essential functions and purposes. These evolutionary processes demonstrated the flexibility and adaptability of medieval social institutions, while preserving core values and practices that provided stability and continuity across generations of social and cultural change. Through careful ceremony, sustained commitment, and ongoing adaptation, medieval couples created marriage relationships that successfully integrated personal fulfillment with social obligation, economic cooperation with emotional intimacy, and individual development with family advancement. The wedding celebrations that inaugurated these complex relationships represented the culmination of extensive preparation and the beginning of lifelong partnerships that would influence not only the couples themselves, but their families, communities, and descendants for generations to come, creating lasting legacies that continue to influence our understanding of marriage, family, and the social institutions that shape human experience across cultures and throughout history. The aftermath of medieval wedding celebrations revealed the true complexity of marital relationships as couples transitioned from the idealized ceremonial environment to the practical realities of daily life together. The wedding feast might last for days, but the marriage would need to endure for decades, requiring entirely different skills and approaches than those displayed during the elaborate celebration. Medieval couples often experienced a period of adjustment as they learned to navigate their new roles and responsibilities while managing the expectations created by their wedding celebration and the ongoing scrutiny of their community. The economic integration that followed medieval marriages required careful coordination of resources, business interests, and financial obligations that could significantly impact both families' prosperity and social standing. The bride's dowry needed to be properly invested and managed, while the groom's property and business interests required integration with his new family responsibilities. This economic merging was rarely simple or straightforward, often requiring months or years of careful negotiation and adjustment to achieve optimal arrangements that satisfied both families and created sustainable foundations for the couple's future prosperity. Medieval marriage involved ongoing relationships with various religious authorities and institutions that influenced every aspect of family life, from the timing of intimate relations to the proper observance of holy days and religious obligations. Priests and other church officials served not only as spiritual advisors, but also as mediators in marital disputes, counselors during difficult times, and authorities on proper conduct and moral behavior. These relationships required careful cultivation and maintenance, as ecclesiastical support could be crucial during legal disputes or social conflicts that threatened family welfare. The social obligations that accompanied medieval marriage extended far beyond immediate family concerns to encompass complex networks of reciprocity and mutual support that characterized medieval community life. Married couples were expected to participate in community celebrations, provide assistance during emergencies, maintain appropriate relationships with neighbors and social peers, and contribute to various communal projects and activities. These obligations required ongoing attention and resources that could significantly influence family budgets and social calendars. Medieval marriage customs included various traditional practices designed to ensure marital harmony and prevent conflicts that might disrupt family life and community peace. These practices might involve regular family meetings to discuss important decisions, established procedures for resolving disagreements, and traditional roles and responsibilities that provided clear guidelines for behavior and expectations. While these customs sometimes seemed restrictive by modern standards, they provided structure and stability that helped medieval couples navigate the challenges of married life. The seasonal demands of medieval agricultural and economic life created natural rhythms of separation and reunion that influenced marital relationships throughout the year. Market seasons might require extended travel for business purposes. Military obligations could separate couples for months at a time, and pilgrimage journeys provided opportunities for spiritual growth that might involve significant periods apart. These separations tested marital bonds while also providing opportunities for individual development and the renewal of appreciation for the marriage relationship. Medieval marriage involved constant attention to the health and welfare of family members, requiring both spouses to maintain knowledge of medical treatments, nutritional requirements, and preventive care that could protect their loved ones from the many diseases and hazards that threatened medieval life. Women typically bore primary responsibility for family health care, but successful couples cooperated in monitoring family health, seeking appropriate treatment when illnesses occurred, and implementing preventive measures that reduced health risks. The educational responsibilities that medieval parents assumed for their children required ongoing coordination and planning that extended throughout the marriage and often determined the family's long-term success and social advancement. Parents needed to arrange appropriate educational opportunities, monitor their children's progress and development, and coordinate with teachers, masters, and other educational authorities to ensure that their children received the training and knowledge necessary for successful adult lives. Medieval marriage customs recognized the importance of maintaining individual identity and personal interests within the context of marital partnership and family obligations. While marriage created new shared responsibilities and common goals, successful couples found ways to accommodate individual talents, interests, and aspirations that enriched their personal lives and contributed to family welfare. This balance between individual fulfillment and marital cooperation required ongoing negotiation and mutual respect that characterized the most successful medieval marriages. The legal complexities associated with medieval marriage required ongoing attention to changing laws, regulations, and court decisions that could affect property rights, inheritance provisions, and family obligations. Couples needed to maintain relationships with legal professionals who could provide current information and advice on legal matters, while ensuring that their family interests were properly protected and advanced. These legal responsibilities often required significant time and financial resources that influenced family budgeting and planning. In the misty dawn of medieval Europe, when church bells echoed across cobblestone streets and candlelight flickered in narrow windows, weddings were elaborate tapestries woven from tradition, politics, and faith. These ceremonies bore little resemblance to the romantic celebrations we know today, for they were intricate dances of social necessity, family honor, and divine blessing that could determine the fate of entire bloodlines. The very concept of marriage in medieval times was fundamentally different from our modern understanding. Love, while not entirely absent, was often considered a secondary consideration to more pressing matters of inheritance, political alliance, and social advancement. Young women, sometimes as early as 12 years old, found themselves promised to men they had never met, their futures decided by fathers who saw matrimony as the ultimate business transaction. The bride's virginity was her most valuable asset, more precious than gold or land, for it guaranteed the legitimacy of future heirs and maintained family honor in a world where reputation could mean the difference between prosperity and ruin. Preparations for a medieval wedding began months, sometimes years, in advance. The bride's family would spend considerable time and resources preparing her trousseau, a collection of clothing, linens, and household goods that would accompany her to her new home. This trousseau was not merely practical, but served as a display of the family's wealth and social standing. Rich fabrics, intricate embroidery, and valuable accessories were carefully selected and crafted by skilled artisans. The bride herself might spend countless hours learning the domestic skills expected of a medieval wife, from managing household servants to preserving foods for the long winter months ahead. The groom's preparations were equally elaborate, but focused on different aspects of the union. He would need to demonstrate his ability to provide for his future wife, often by securing property, establishing trade relationships, or proving his military prowess. In noble families, extensive negotiations would take place between the two families, with detailed contracts outlining dowries, inheritance rights, and the division of property. These agreements were legal documents of immense importance, often involving lawyers, witnesses, and church officials to ensure their validity. The selection of the wedding date itself was a complex process governed by religious calendar, seasonal considerations, and superstitious beliefs. The church prohibited marriages during certain holy periods, including Lent, Advent, and various feast days throughout the year. Spring and early summer were preferred seasons, not only for practical reasons of weather and food availability, but because they symbolized new life and fertility. However, many couples had to work around harvest schedules, as the agricultural cycle dominated medieval life and required the participation of entire communities. Medieval wedding invitations were quite different from the elegant cards we might expect today. News of upcoming nuptials spread through word of mouth, with family members, friends, and community leaders personally visiting potential guests to extend invitations. The size of the wedding was often a direct reflection of the family's social status and wealth. Noble weddings might attract hundreds of guests from across the region, while peasant celebrations were typically smaller, more intimate affairs involving only the immediate community. The bride's attire was perhaps the most visible symbol of her family's status and the importance of the occasion. Contrary to popular modern belief, white wedding gowns were not the standard in medieval times. Instead, brides typically wore their finest dress, often in rich colors like deep blue, burgundy, or gold. The fabric might be silk, velvet, or fine wool, depending on the family's means. Wealthy brides adorned themselves with precious jewelry, including elaborate headdresses, ornate belts, and rings set with precious stones. The dress itself might be embellished with intricate embroidery, pearls, or metallic thread that caught the light as the bride moved. Hair was considered a woman's crowning glory, and unmarried women traditionally wore their hair loose and flowing as a symbol of their virginity. The wedding day was often the last time a woman would display her hair so openly, as married women were expected to cover their hair with veils or headdresses. This transition from loose hair to covered head was deeply symbolic, representing the bride's passage from maidenhood to wifehood. The groom's wedding attire was equally important, though perhaps less elaborate than his bride's. He would wear his finest tunic, often made of expensive fabric and richly decorated. A new sword might be commissioned for the occasion, serving both as a symbol of his ability to protect his new family and as a display of his wealth and status. Noble grooms often wore family colors or heraldic symbols that proclaimed their lineage and social position to all who witnessed the ceremony. Medieval wedding ceremonies themselves were fascinating combinations of pagan tradition, Christian ritual, and legal procedure. The actual wedding might take place in several stages, beginning with the betrothal ceremony, which could occur months or even years before the actual marriage. During this ceremony, vows were exchanged, rings were blessed and given, and the couple was considered legally bound, though they would not live together until after the final wedding ceremony. The church ceremony was the heart of the medieval wedding, though it might surprise modern couples to know that the actual exchange of vows often took place not inside the church, but on its steps, in full view of the community. This public location ensured that the marriage was witnessed by many people, making it legally binding and preventing future disputes about the validity of the union. The priest would bless the couple and pray over them, but the actual words of commitment were spoken by the bride and groom themselves, often in the local language rather than Latin, so that all witnesses could understand. Inside the church, a special mass would be celebrated, during which the couple would receive communion and additional blessings. The ceremony might include the reading of marriage bans, public announcements of the intended union that had been proclaimed on 3 previous Sundays, to give anyone with objections the opportunity to speak. This practice helped prevent bigamous marriages and ensured that both parties were free to marry. One of the most charming aspects of medieval wedding ceremonies was the exchange of symbolic gifts and gestures. The groom would present his bride with a ring, but he would also place it on different fingers while reciting, "In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit," finally placing it on the 4th finger of her left hand, where it was believed a vein ran directly to the heart. Coins might be exchanged as symbols of the groom's ability to provide financial security, and sometimes the bride would present her new husband with a specially embroidered handkerchief or other token of her domestic skills. The wedding feast that followed the ceremony was perhaps the most elaborate part of the entire celebration. For wealthy families, these feasts could last for days, with multiple courses, entertainment, and accommodations for guests who might have traveled great distances to attend. The feast was not merely a celebration, but a display of hospitality, wealth, and social connections that could influence the families standing in the community for years to come. Medieval wedding feasts were extraordinary affairs that showcased the culinary skills of the era and the wealth of the hosting families. The preparation for such a feast might begin weeks in advance, with servants and cooks working tirelessly to prepare the elaborate dishes that would grace the tables. Wealthy families would spare no expense, serving exotic spices, imported wines, and elaborate presentations that were as much about spectacle as sustenance. The menu for a noble wedding feast might include multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Roasted meats were the centerpiece of medieval celebrations, with whole pigs, oxen, or deer slowly cooked over open fires. These massive roasts were often presented in dramatic fashion, carried into the hall by teams of servants while musicians played and guests cheered. Fowls of all kinds graced medieval tables, from common chickens and geese to exotic swans and peacocks, sometimes prepared and presented with their feathers restored to create stunning visual displays. Fish dishes were equally important, particularly in wealthy households where fresh fish could be transported in barrels of water or preserved in salt for special occasions. Pike, salmon, and eel were considered delicacies, often prepared with elaborate sauces made from herbs, wine, and imported spices. During religious fasting periods, fish became even more central to the celebration, with creative cooks developing increasingly sophisticated preparations to satisfy noble palates while adhering to church dietary restrictions. The bread served at medieval wedding feasts was far superior to the coarse, dark loaves that formed the daily diet of most people. White bread, made from carefully sifted flour, was a luxury item that demonstrated the host family's wealth and status. Elaborate shaped breads might be created specifically for the wedding, with decorative crusts and sweet filling that served as both food and entertainment for the guests. Medieval cooks took great pride in their ability to create visually stunning presentations. Subtleties, elaborate decorative dishes designed more for display than consumption, were common at noble weddings. These might include pastry castles, sugar sculptures, or elaborate arrangements of fruits and flowers that served as conversation pieces and demonstrations of the kitchen's skill. Some subtleties told stories or depicted scenes from popular romances, adding an element of theater to the dining experience. Beverages at medieval wedding feasts were as varied and elaborate as the food. Wine was the preferred drink of the nobility, often imported from distant regions and aged in the host family's cellars for special occasions. Ale and beer were more common among the general population, but even these humble beverages might be specially brewed for the wedding celebration. Mead made from fermented honey was considered particularly appropriate for weddings because of its associations with fertility and sweetness, giving rise to the term honeymoon for the period following the wedding when the couple would consume mead together. Spiced wines and punches were popular medieval drinks that combined wine with exotic spices like cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. These beverages were often served warm and were believed to have medicinal properties that would ensure the health and fertility of the newlyweds. The preparation of these drinks was considered an art form, with experienced servants carefully blending spices and wines to create the perfect flavor combinations. Entertainment at medieval wedding feasts was as elaborate as the food and drink. Musicians were essential participants in any significant celebration, with minstrels and troubadours traveling from castle to castle to perform at important events. These musicians brought with them repertoires of songs, including romantic ballads that celebrated love and marriage, epic tales of heroic deeds, and humorous songs that might gently tease the newlyweds or tell amusing stories about marriage and domestic life. Dancing was a central part of medieval wedding celebrations, with elaborate choreographed dances that allowed guests to participate in the festivities while displaying their social grace and breeding. Noble families took great pride in their dancing skills, and wedding celebrations provided opportunities to demonstrate these accomplishments to a wider audience. The dances themselves often told stories or symbolized various aspects of courtly life, with complex steps and patterns that required considerable skill and practice to execute properly. The tradition of wedding gifts in medieval times was quite different from modern practices. Guests typically brought practical items that would help the couple establish their new household, but these gifts were often far more elaborate and valuable than simple household items. Wealthy guests might present the couple with precious metals, fine fabrics, exotic spices, or even livestock that would provide ongoing economic benefits. Land grants were among the most precious gifts, providing the couple with income-producing property that could support them throughout their married life. Medieval wedding customs included many traditions that seemed strange or superstitious to modern sensibilities, but held deep meaning for medieval people. The throwing of rice or other grains symbolized wishes for fertility and abundance, while the bride's bouquet often included specific herbs and flowers chosen for their supposed magical properties. Rosemary was popular for its association with remembrance and fidelity, while other herbs were believed to promote love, fertility, or protection from evil influences. Wedding rings in medieval times carried deep symbolic significance beyond their role as simple jewelry. The circular shape represented eternity and the endless nature of true love, while the precious metal demonstrated the value the groom placed on his bride. The placement of the ring on the fourth finger of the left hand was based on the medieval belief that a vein in that finger ran directly to the heart, creating a physical connection between the symbol of marriage and the seat of love and emotion. The role of parents and extended family in medieval weddings was far more significant than in modern celebrations. Marriage was understood to be an alliance between families rather than simply a union between two individuals, and family members played crucial roles in every aspect of the planning and execution of the wedding celebration. Mothers might spend years preparing their daughters for marriage, teaching them the domestic skills, social graces, and religious devotion expected of medieval wives. The economic aspects of medieval weddings extended far beyond the immediate costs of the celebration itself. Weddings were major economic events that could affect entire communities, providing income for craftsmen, food producers, entertainers, and service providers. The preparation for a major wedding might require months of work from dozens of people, creating temporary employment and stimulating local economic activity. The religious elements permeated every aspect of medieval wedding celebrations, reflecting the central role of the church in medieval society. Prayers were offered at multiple points throughout the celebration, asking for divine blessing on the union and the couple's future together. Special masses might be said for the couple's fertility, prosperity, and spiritual welfare, with priests offering guidance on the religious obligations of married life. Medieval wedding celebrations often included charitable elements that reflected Christian teachings about generosity and social responsibility. Wealthy families would distribute food to the poor, provide dowries for less fortunate young women, or make donations to local monasteries and churches. These charitable acts were believed to bring divine blessing on the marriage, while demonstrating the family's piety and social consciousness. The length of medieval wedding celebrations varied dramatically depending on the social status and wealth of the families involved. Noble weddings might continue for a week or more, with different activities and entertainments scheduled for each day. Tournaments might be organized in honor of the couple, with knights competing in jousting matches and other martial displays that celebrated the military prowess associated with noble masculinity. For common people, wedding celebrations were necessarily more modest but no less meaningful. Village weddings might involve the entire community, with neighbors contributing food, labor, and entertainment to create memorable celebrations within their means. These community weddings often featured traditional folk music, simple but hearty meals, and dancing that continued late into the night. The wedding night held particular significance in medieval culture, marking the couple's transition from betrothed individuals to a married unit. The consummation of the marriage was not considered a private matter but a community concern, as it legally confirmed the validity of the union and began the process of creating legitimate heirs. The seasonal celebrations that punctuated medieval life provided regular opportunities for married couples to reaffirm their social bonds and demonstrate their continued prosperity and happiness. Christmas festivities, Easter celebrations, harvest festivals, and Saints' Day observances all offered occasions for couples to participate in community activities while displaying their successful partnership. Medieval marriage involved constant negotiation between competing demands and loyalties, as couples balanced their obligations to each other against responsibilities to parents, children, extended family, feudal lords, church authorities, and community members. The most successful medieval marriages were those that managed these competing demands diplomatically, while maintaining the mutual respect and cooperation necessary for domestic harmony and family prosperity. The preservation of family traditions, stories, and cultural heritage represented important responsibilities for medieval married couples who served as links between past and future generations. The success of these cultural transmission activities ensured family continuity while maintaining connections to ancestral traditions and values that provided identity and meaning across generations of social and cultural change. Medieval marriage customs evolved gradually over time in response to changing social conditions, religious teachings, and cultural influences, creating rich traditions that balance stability with flexibility and adaptation. These evolutionary processes reflected the dynamic nature of medieval society, while maintaining core values and practices that provided continuity and meaning across generations. The complexity and sophistication of medieval marriage customs reflected the advanced social and cultural development of medieval European civilization, demonstrating the ability of medieval people to create institutions that balanced practical necessity with spiritual significance and personal fulfillment. These achievements continue to influence contemporary understanding of marriage and family relationships, while providing historical perspective on the evolution of human social institutions. Medieval wedding celebrations thus represented far more than simple parties or social events, serving as crucial rituals that established the foundations for complex marital relationships that would influence not only the couples themselves, but their families, communities, and descendants for generations to come. The careful attention to detail, elaborate symbolism, and community participation that characterized these celebrations reflected their fundamental importance within medieval society and culture. Through careful ceremony, ongoing negotiation, sustained commitment, and continuous adaptation, medieval couples created marriages that successfully integrated personal relationships with social institutions, economic partnerships with spiritual unions, and individual fulfillment with community obligations. The wedding celebrations that inaugurated these complex relationships were thus not merely historical curiosities, but successful solutions to the fundamental challenges of human social organization that continue to influence contemporary understanding of marriage, family, and community life. The enduring influence of medieval marriage traditions on subsequent European cultural development demonstrates the success of these customs in addressing fundamental human needs for security, companionship, social connection, and spiritual fulfillment within the constraints and opportunities of medieval life. The balance between individual desires and social obligations that characterized medieval marriage continues to offer insights relevant to contemporary discussions of marriage and family relationships. The rich tapestry of medieval wedding customs reveals a sophisticated understanding of human nature and social organization that enabled medieval couples to create lasting partnerships capable of adapting to the challenges and opportunities of their complex and dynamic world. These achievements represent enduring contributions to human civilization that continue to enrich our understanding of marriage, family, and the social institutions that shape human experience across cultures and throughout history. In the end, medieval weddings were not simply ceremonies, but transformative experiences that marked the beginning of lifelong journeys filled with challenges, opportunities, joys, and sorrows that would test and strengthen the bonds created during those elaborate celebrations. The couples who emerged from these magnificent festivities carried with them not only the blessings of their families and communities, but also the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who had navigated the complexities of married life before them. The legacy of these medieval weddings lives on in our contemporary understanding of marriage as both a personal commitment and a social institution, reminding us that the desire to celebrate love, create family bonds, and build lasting partnerships transcends historical periods and cultural boundaries. The elaborate ceremonies, complex negotiations, and joyful celebrations that characterized medieval weddings continue to inspire modern couples while providing historical perspective on the enduring importance of marriage in human society. Through their careful attention to ceremony, commitment to family and community, and dedication to creating lasting bonds of love and partnership, medieval couples established traditions that continue to influence how we understand and celebrate marriage today. Their legacy reminds us that weddings are not merely parties, but sacred celebrations that mark the beginning of new chapters in human experience, creating bonds that can endure across decades and influence generations yet to come.